In a climate-controlled vault outside London, behind reinforced glass, sits a book bound in oak boards and white leather. It's 900 years old. The ink hasn't faded, and if you could read the cramped Latin shorthand packed into its pages, you'd find something that shouldn't exist: a complete, name-by-name account of who owned every acre of England, who owned it before, and exactly what it was worth, down to the pig.
Historians have a question they still can't fully answer. How did a medieval kingdom, with no printing press, no telegraph, no National Census Bureau, produce something this detailed, this accurate, in under a year? Let's start with what we know for certain. The year is 1086. King William, the same William who invaded England 20 years earlier, sends out teams of commissioners across the entire country. Not soldiers, investigators. Their job: ride into every village, gather the local jurors under oath, and extract the truth about who owns what. Land, livestock, mills, even the number of plows. Here's the detail that should bother you. They didn't just want the current numbers, they wanted two sets: what the land was worth now, under Norman rule, and what it was worth before, under the old English lords. Side by side. No room for anyone to quietly inflate or hide anything in between. Why would a king need that kind of precision? Most assume it was simple greed, a tax grab. And partly, it was. But that explanation doesn't account for the scale. We're talking about roughly 13,000 settlements recorded, cross-referenced and verified, in a country with poor roads, no shared written language between conquerors and conquered, and constant threat of rebellion. Historian David Bates, who has spent much of his career studying the Norman conquest, has called it one of the most remarkable administrative feats of the entire medieval period. And he means that nobody else in Europe came close to matching it for another 600 years. So how did they actually pull it off? The trick wasn't technology, it was leverage. The commissioners didn't ask people nicely. They assembled juries of local men, often a mix of Normans and English, and forced them to testify under oath, with the threat of royal punishment hanging over anyone caught lying. If two villages disagreed about a boundary or an ownership claim, the dispute got recorded too, argument and all. The survey wasn't just numbers. It was, in places, a transcript of conflict. And once it was finished, the English gave it a nickname that tells you everything about how it felt to live through it: the Domesday Book. As in doomsday. As in, like the Last Judgment. There was no appeal. Whatever the book said you owned, or didn't, was now permanent, legal fact. Here's where the investigation gets interesting. You'd expect a document like this to fade into obscurity. A medieval tax record, eventually replaced, eventually forgotten. That's not what happened. Go look at a modern map of English counties and parishes. A striking number of those boundaries trace directly back to lines first fixed in the Domesday survey. Not because anyone in the last few centuries deliberately preserved them, because once a boundary becomes legally enforceable, redrawing it requires someone with enough power to bother. Mostly, nobody did. The path of least resistance became permanent. But the real twist isn't in England. It's in what the Domesday model became. Historian Robin Fleming, who has examined the survey in detail, points out that its real power wasn't the information itself. Local communities already knew who owned what. The power was that the information was now written down, centralized, and controlled by the Crown. Oral memory, communal understanding, generations of lived knowledge. None of that counted for anything in a courtroom anymore. Only the written record did. That idea didn't stay in 11th century England. Centuries later, when European powers expanded into the Americas, Africa, and South Asia. They brought the same logic with them. Survey the land, write it down, and treat the written document as more legally real than the people who'd lived there for generations. Communal and customary land use, systems that had worked for centuries, were overridden by colonial registries because they weren't on paper in the right format. The Domesday playbook, exported. So here's the actual mystery, the one worth sitting with. You almost certainly own property, rent an apartment, or will sign a lease someday. Somewhere behind that piece of paper is an unbroken chain of logic that traces back to a Norman king who sent investigators on horseback to extract sworn testimony from frightened villagers about how many pigs they had. The idea that a document outranks lived experience, memory, and custom. That idea has a starting point, and it's sitting in a vault outside London right now, bound in leather, still legible. The next time someone tells you a piece of paper proves what's really yours, remember where that logic came from and who it was originally built to control.